1946, the Hungarian government printed a single banknote with a face value of 100 quintillion pengo. That is a 1 followed by 20 zeros. Prices spiraled so wildly they doubled every 15 hours. Holding cash for just 4 days meant losing 90% of its purchasing power. This economic collapse is a massive departure from how the currency started. The pengo was introduced in 1927, specifically to fix post-World War I inflation, and it was originally strictly pegged to the gold standard. Locals originally called it the ringing pengo, referencing the crisp sound of precious metal coins, and it quickly earned a reputation as the most stable, hard currency in the region. But the Second World War entirely obliterated Hungary's physical production machinery. With bridges, factories, and railways in ruins, the government faced massive rebuilding costs at the exact moment economic output dropped to zero. This absolute destruction of physical productivity created a massive financial vacuum. Desperate for a solution, the state would go on to make 3 compounding economic mistakes that turned a crisis into a total collapse. The first misstep began with the crushing financial demands placed on the country by the occupying Soviet Union. Hungary was forced to pay reparations, calculated at highly inflated 1938 world prices, plus an arbitrary bonus. To service this impossible foreign debt, the government nationalized the bank. They ordered the institution to start printing unbacked money, flooding the system with cash to meet immediate obligations. At the same time, the occupying Soviet Red Army exacerbated the crisis by issuing their own unbacked military money directly into the local economy, severely diluting whatever value remained. By using a printing press to solve physical debt obligations, the state instantly divorced the pengo's value from the nation's actual economic reality. The second mistake was a psychological surrender. As inflation spiked, the government completely abandoned designing new currency, instead pulling old printing plates from 1926 out of storage to rapidly print higher denominations. They introduced a desperate accounting trick called the mil pengo, literally millions of pengo, just to cut down the number of zeros printed on the physical bills. When millions weren't enough, they escalated to the pengo, representing trillions. To produce these, they didn't even change the artwork. They merely swapped out the ink color on the exact same old designs. When the public saw the government visibly recycling low-quality notes with slightly different ink, absolute faith in the currency evaporated. People realized the paper was essentially worthless, turning high inflation into outright panic. In an attempt to regain control in January 1946, the government introduced a parallel currency, known as the adopengo, or tax pengo. This dual-axis line chart shows how it was supposed to work. The plunging line represents the rapidly deteriorating value of the regular penge, while the perfectly flat, stable line represents the auto-penge index, acting as a strict unit of account to protect the national budget from daily inflation. But in July 1946, they made their fatal misstep. The government allowed these auto-penge tax bills to become legal tender for the general public, and the stable index immediately broke its peg, plummeting downward in tandem with the regular currency. This triggered a secondary hyperinflation loop. By the end of July, the conversion rate reached an astronomical 2 sextillion regular penge for a single auto penge. Introducing what was supposed to be a superior parallel currency didn't stabilize the economy. It cannibalized the original currency and accelerated the total collapse of the financial system. On August 1st, 1946, the government hit the absolute reset button. They abandoned the penge entirely and introduced a brand new currency, the forint. To wipe the slate clean, the exchange rate was set at 1 forint for every 400 octillion penge. That meant dropping 29 zeros from the old money just to start over. Looking back at this absolute devastation, you have to ask who actually benefited from the complete destruction of Hungary's currency. The primary beneficiaries were the Hungarian Communist Party, the MKP, led by Matthias Rákosi. The MKP actively weaponized this hyperinflation to wipe out the accumulated wealth and financial reserves of the country's landowning and business classes. By effectively bankrupting these groups, the MKP eliminated their main political opposition. The old social structures were ruined, allowing the communists to step in and position themselves as the sole architects of the economic stabilization. When a government relies on the printing press to replace actual productivity, it destroys purchasing power. But it also dismantles the entire social order, leaving a perfect vacuum for radical political restructuring.